But Adam, I want to kind of transition this conversation to the larger series outlook here, and I want to spin it to a Miami perspective here, where we mentioned at the top, no Terry Rozier, no Jimmy Butler. So immediately, and the two of you talked about this with Jason Timp on our last episode, where just from the get-go, there's a huge talent deficit right now that Miami is trying to make up for. And, scheme can only get you so far if you don't have the talent. Talent rules all in the NBA. And it's when you're at least in the same ballpark, then maybe scheme can put you over the top. But without Jimmy and without Terry, this is a pretty uphill battle for the Heat right now, especially just trying to find the points, right? That's about 35 to 40 points that they don't have available to them. So when you look at yesterday's game and we start looking ahead to game 2 on Wednesday night, Adam, I'll start with you here. Is there anything you saw that Miami did that you think they can potentially lean into, and whether this is an individual performance, something Eric Spoelstra did that can potentially give the Celtics trouble here going forward, or is this potentially just an uphill battle that they're going to have to keep clawing their way through, but they're going to need some breaks if they're going to make it a series?
Yeah, I didn't see much. Like, they ran a bit through Bam on the handoff actions, which is always going to be something that you want to do against this Boston defense. They played a little bit through Jaime, which I thought was actually okay. I liked the way he played. But really, in my perspective, the one thing they're asking for, and I will preface this by saying I haven't had my second watch of the game in yet, so there's stuff that I might pick up from there. But from where I'm standing right now, from where I'm sitting right now, Miami's best chance of being in this series in 2 games' time is going to be taking advantage of the slippages from Boston, like we saw in the first 6 minutes of the fourth quarter, where they come out, they know they're up, they kind of dawdle down the floor. They're not really getting into their actions early, a bit sloppy. Al Horford's getting pissed. Those are the moments.
Just real quick, Adam, I got that here for you. It was an 18-2 run from 7:49 to 3:57. So 4 minutes, under 4 minutes, 18-2 run. It happened very quickly.
And those are going to be the moments where Miami can swing a game. Maybe they can even tie a series. This is a team that doesn't know when to quit. They don't know when they're beat. They refuse to lie down and take it. And if you slip for, as you said, a 4-minute stretch, you can lose 18 points off of. Now, imagine if it was a tie game. Imagine if they'd managed to hang around and then Boston have that 4-minute slip, and all of a sudden now Miami are up 18 with 3 minutes left. That's how quickly things can change. So that, to me, is their biggest opportunity to steal a game or stay in this series until Jimmy's back, is by waiting for those slight slippages, those slight momentum shifting moments, and then just hammer the shit out of them until you can't hammer it no more.
Yeah, Greg, did that moment give you concern? Because this is really the only stretch of the game I think you could look to as a Celtics fan and be like, that was minorly concerning. They were up 30 at the time of this 18-2 run, but to Adam's point, in the larger picture, which, as all things with the Celtics, it's all about the larger picture, not just this individual moment. When you think about if this was not even just a tie game, but even if this was a 20-point game or an 18-point game in a 4-minute stretch like this happens now, human nature, maybe they wouldn't have dropped into this because they were up 30, like I said. But we have seen these type of runs happen before. Any concern, Greg, or just listen, they were up 30. It happens. They still won by 20. Let's move on. What were your thoughts?
Well, Mazzulla says, I have a quote from him pulled up here. He says, we had 4 turnovers and then 7 in the fourth quarter. So I would say that points off turnovers led to the comeback. 6 points on off-ball defense communication, and some of them, they made some shots there. DeLon Wright obviously had 5 threes in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So Mazzulla says 70-30 was stuff that we can control, right? Those off-ball cuts, Jalen got confused on some switches off ball and some split actions a couple times on some back doors. And I think for me, going into that fourth quarter, the biggest thing I wanted to see was that the Celtics were able to not let any of their key shooters, meaning Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, get going in the fourth quarter. DeLon Wright hitting threes, sure, man. Like, go ahead, keep shooting those threes. He's a good player, and I think he'll probably see more time. And I think it's a good sign for the Heat that he was able to hit those shots. He was a midseason acquisition. He hasn't really.
Do we think he's the new Caleb Martin?
I don't think he's
Caleb Martin, because Caleb Martin's not the old Caleb Martin. I'll tell you that much.
No, Caleb Martin sucks. And I think that DeLon Wright, For them, that's one of those like Dean Wade type moments where a guy just gets hot. And thankfully the Celtics were able to kind of right the ship before that got completely out of control, because Joe called a timeout, I think, when the game got to 15, or maybe it was 18, but 30-point lead or 34-point lead, whatever it was. As they started to come back, you could feel the Garden start to feel that maybe this team would blow another big lead. And the fact that they were able to stem the tide before it got completely out of control, I think, is a positive sign, because in the past, maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe that gets all the way to single digits, and it didn't get the single digits. I think the closest they got was either 12 or 14 points. So it was a positive sign for me in the long run that the Celtics were able to put them away.
Yeah, and I'll stay with you here, Greg. Do you think what adjustments do you think the Celtics could see from Spoelstra in Miami going forward here?
Well, the Celtics were kind of baiting them into playing a little bit more ISO ball than I think maybe they were expecting, especially with Bam, right? They kind of ISO'd Bam a lot. I don't have the numbers pulled up on how many ISO possessions Bam had, but it did seem like he was trying to go at Kristaps Porzingis, and the Celtics were okay with just going, okay, Bam, you're not going to beat us for 48 minutes going ISO against Kristaps, but we're not going to send help and overhelp so that you can find shooters and things of that nature. So trying to get some more actions that force rotations out of the Celtics, I think I don't know how Spo's going to do it, but I think that's what they're probably going to try and game plan for, is how to get the Celtics in rotation, because the Celtics weren't in rotation much at all during the game.
Yeah, same question to you, Adam. Anything that you think that if you could put yourself in Miami's shoes here, that you think you might attempt to do to get back in the series?
Not lose the first game of the play-in tournament.
Yeah, that would have been a good step.
That would have been the only step that would have saved them right now. No, joking aside, they ran a few nice actions. I'm gonna have to go back and see if I can label them, where they'd have Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero in a kind of screening for each other, kind of like a twirl action, but in the middle of the floor. And what had happened would be Robinson would come off a screen and curl around the perimeter. Hero would come off a screen and then kind of curl out towards the opposite wing, like the weak side wing. And that would drag the defense quite wide open. And then they'd have Bam cut through the middle and either receive the ball or set a secondary screen for Robinson or Hero to come off. And then they tried to create space that way. They tried to bend the defense that way. It didn't really work, but it looked like you're really testing the defensive, the switchability of this roster by doing that, because you're making guys chase over screens, you're forcing switches. Sometimes Boston want to peel switch those actions, but it's happening so quickly. Unless you've got excellent communication, you're kind of just going to need to stick with your man, and then you're taking Boston out of what works for them defensively. So I'd be looking at more motion cuts like that, having two shooters put in an action, having them cut off of each other to the opposite sides of the floor, and then coming over screens and making people chase. That would be interesting to me, to really test how good Boston's perimeter defense is. How good is Derek White and Drew Holiday's communication? How comfortable is Porzingis switching in those situations versus staying at home? What happens if he stays in drop and you have to switch there? And those are the questions, if I was Spoelstra, that I'd be trying to ask in game 2, ready to manipulate in games 3 and 4 when you're back on your home floor and your role players are going to play that marginally better due to that home court boost. So there's a few questions I'd have if I was Spo that I'd like to kind of find answers to in the next game. But overall, I just think, even with Jimmy, and I'm going to say this, even with Jimmy, I don't think they were talented enough to beat Boston. I think they would have been a lot better, and they will be a lot better when he's back. I'm not going to be disingenuous here. But at the same time, I'm not crying about it. Miami wasn't crying when Tatum hurt his foot in the game 7 and didn't play. They won. A victory is a victory. You move on. So it is what it is. But I think that would be where
it will be interesting to see, if Jimmy, it sounds like it's probably a small chance that Jimmy comes back. I think it would potentially be indicative if they're able to steal this game 2. Now they're down to game 2. If they can steal game 2, I think that probably gives it at least a chance. But, if they head back to Miami down 2-0, it's probably game 3 or bust, whether or not Jimmy's going to play in this series. And so we'll have to see what happens. I don't really know much about the Terry Rozier neck injury. So that's another one, just from the he's certainly not going to help their defense, but from them being able to create more offense, certainly having Terry Rozier there would help him, or would help the Heat, I should say. Last thing before we move off of this game, there's a little dust up at the end of the game between Caleb Martin, who we just recently mentioned sucks. And also, by the way, how much of an anomaly, like how much more frustrating is it watching Caleb Martin all this season? Because every time I've turned into the Heat, I tried to find, yeah, man, Caleb Martin's pretty good. I get it. I get why what happened in the Eastern Conference Finals happened last year. Haven't seen it once. Haven't seen it once all season. Didn't see it yesterday. Like looking back just on like the history of thinking about guys that have moments that are usually just isolated to games, how much of an anomaly is it that Caleb Martin had that in? Think about the series that he had last year. Caleb Martin.
Got to flush it, Will. You got to flush it. You got to move.
It was frustrating me, but he had a little dust up at the end of the game with Jason Tatum, where he comes flying in. Tatum takes what at first looked like it could have been a relatively scary fall, but he got right back up, was good to go. But here, quickly, let's just listen to Joe Mazzulla's thoughts on that particular dust up.
It looked like he hit his head up.
I was just thinking, I was waiting to see what he was going to do. I was kind of excited about the whole situation, so I enjoyed watching him.
What about in terms of how he feels?
He's fine.
He's fine.
Yeah.
Crazy Joe Mazzulla.
Joey
What
Jiu-Jitsu.
a nutbag. What a nutbag this guy is. And it's become endearing, but I was excited. That's his reaction. I want to see what happened. I was excited. That was Joe Mazzulla. Did you guys have any thoughts on, did you guys think it was a dirty play at all, or did you just enjoy, kind of like Joe Mazzulla, the response by Jaylen Brown and others to quickly come to Jason Tatum's defense?
I was initially concerned because if you think back to last year in the first round of the playoffs, Giannis got hurt on a very similar play, right? Where he ended up hurting his back when Kevin Love fouled him hard. So the way that Tatum fell, I was initially concerned that he landed directly on his tailbone. And if you land on your tailbone, anything could happen. And when Tatum got up, I was very excited, obviously, that he got up. Not the same type of excitement that Joe Mazzulla was feeling, but I was excited that he was okay. And Jaylen coming to his defense in that moment, I think, was big, because Jaylen this year has shown that without Marcus Smart, he's going to be the guy to step up and not take any shit from anybody. And it was nice to see him go at Caleb Martin in that moment, because Caleb Martin, to your point, Will, gave it to Jaylen Brown. He completely outplayed Jaylen Brown in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. And Jaylen Brown, he remembers that. So he was just talking some shit. There's some leaked audio. Caleb Martin saying that Jaylen's not like that. He's not that guy. And Jaylen was just, you better watch that shit. And you better watch that shit. And I like seeing Jaylen, when Jaylen gets into the finger pointing mode, that's one of my favorite Jaylens.
Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was dirty. I think it was a bit over eager. Yeah, a bit reckless. Maybe like you could see Tatum was going up. Like I don't think Martin was took by surprise that he swiped Tatum out, because once you're in the air, you've got no center of gravity, and you can be moved anywhere. And you could see, and I know some Heat fans were saying like, "Oh well, Drew boxed out Martin and kind of pushed Martin in." No, he didn't. No, he didn't. I don't think it was dirty. I don't agree with Scal. I don't know if you guys have heard Scal's take.
Yeah, this is why I brought it up. I saw Scal's reaction to it. Yeah.
Have you heard it, Greg?
What did he say, that it was on purpose?
Anyway, he said like, "Oh, it's weird how there was a timeout at 1 minute 30 left, and then 30 seconds later, this foul happens." Like,
basically, Scal inserted his own context.
Yeah, like, oh, they call the code red, and let's take Tatum out the game. I don't think anything nefarious like that.
It was a little bit of a stretch by Scal.
I mean, that is the only way they're going to win this series, is if they take out one of our guys. So.